today's conversation is all about effective communication, and we're very shortly here going to be joined by Nathan Hughes. He's the co-founder and chief people officer at Detroit Labs. And Nathan's got an interesting background. You know, he started off engineering, right? I've seen some beautiful websites developed by Nathan as he's backstage enjoying this right now. And but you know, since then he's gone on to grow engineering teams and ultimately grow a company full of people, which is fantastic. So now I am going to mention something, Toby, and he doesn't know I'm going to mention this, and I don't think you do either. So we started Detroit Labs in 2011.
Yeah.
I was 27 when we started Detroit Labs, so I'll date myself a little bit there. And going into a leadership position, at least for me, that was new, right? Especially the people aspects of leadership, and as we like to call it, the peopling.
Yeah.
And not knowing what to expect, honestly, not knowing how to do anything when it comes to that. I really looked at Nathan for how he approached things, how he didn't solve people's problems. He encouraged them to solve their own problems. He gave them the tools, the tips, the tricks on how to do that. And so in a lot of ways, without him even trying, he's been a mentor to me for how to, help people grow, how to do the peopling. And I can honestly say I about 95 to 99% of my peopling skills, which this might be a knock on him, we don't know, but it came from Nathan. So with that, again, he's probably not mad at me now. I'm gonna bring him in.
Wow.
Nathan, how are you?
Well, it's been a great show. I think we all learned a lot, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that.
All right.
Yeah, and you're supposed to warn a guest when you're gonna bring stuff up so that they can prepare.
I think leaning towards flattering is certainly better than leaning towards criticism.
Okay. Let me put that on my little notepad. Not to do.
All right,
I've got to share though. 1 p.m. rolls around, and 1 p.m. of course is when school starts, right? For all of us that have school at home, and 1 p.m. and my internet goes down completely, and I got a kid coming down the stairs. What's going on? I'm in a test, and I got another kid. I can't. And so I rush around and I unplug everything. I actually checked my WoW bill. I'm like, did I pay? 108, it shows up again. So wow. A little out of breath, but that's great. It's wonderful. That's how it goes.
Yeah, for anybody watching, wondering why on earth Toby and I were bantering that long about absolutely nothing, it's because Nathan disappeared backstage the minute we were live. And we're talking over here trying to figure out if this show is actually going to happen, but we're here.
Yeah.
You made it. And this is going to be a fun one. And not just to chime in a little bit with what Dan said, Nathan, I'm so excited that you're able to join us today. I feel like this is one of your strongest, you have so many skills, but you're so good at just teaching. And I'm excited to learn today, for real.
Also worth noting, Diana is in the comments right now. So if you have questions, she'll be kind of keeping an eye on things. Again, Nathan, has so kindly agreed to answer live questions. So that's fantastic. All right, Nathan, you were an engineer, developed many beautiful websites, grew engineering teams. But what made you kind of eventually start to switch over to the peopling side of this world?
That's a good question. So I was all full technical when I started my career. Back in the 90s, I was doing database work, ERP work, got into programming, Java programming, Perl programming. So very, very much on the technology side. And I think what people find and see is the same as what I found and see. As you grow your career, as you spend more and more years, you keep on looking for those moves to make that you can amplify and do more with whatever you know how to do. So when you're technical, a lot of times that looks like, okay, how do I really perfect and understand my knowledge of this technology? And then how do I add maybe a couple other new technologies on? And maybe how do I expand that and work? And what happens is you get to points and you have to make moves in your career and decide where you want to go. And I stayed on that, okay, how can I keep amplifying my contributions? And how can I keep bringing more value? And I think that really stems from the fact I've always been in services companies. So I've always been doing client services work. So I've always been in a situation where an external client's asking you to do something, and then next month it might be different, next month it might be different. So I think that angled me towards a career trajectory where when I realized, you know what, learning or becoming better at a new technology isn't actually the amplifier. Helping maybe bring up a couple brand new hires that just graduated and helping them get comfortable with technology, that amplifies much more. And then in management and leadership, you start finding the same thing. How can I help a team of people do what I used to maybe do? And how can I set the path or make a space for them to do better? And then how can I maybe make multiple teams? How can I make a company? And as I was going down this path and always looking for the moves to take what I know how to do and my skills and make it more valuable, I think the people aspect of that became the common challenge. What we would see over and over again, I'm in services companies, and sometimes it's this technology and sometimes it's that. Maybe it's installation of an ERP system, maybe it's custom software development. The technology problems sort of stayed. And what became more important and more difficult over time was the people problems, was the group of folks trying to come together and build something together and getting that rolled out. And so I think that was why over the years, and it was never a plan. Like when I was graduating college, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to do this. It was always that next step that allowed me to amplify some of my specific skills and specific values in a way that made sense.
So sticking on the people side of things, the team growing side of things, in some past Labs Live episodes, we've talked about high functioning teams, teams that work really well together, and effective teams in general. What do you think is the foundation of a high functioning, fully effective team?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. We're humans, and humans are supposed to just be sort of team-based, tribal-based. We want to be around groups. Mm-hmm. And a team at its most basic, all it is a group of people that are trying to accomplish a similar thing. And so it sounds like, and it feels like it should just be natural and easy for a group of people to come together and do that. Isn't that what we're designed to do? Isn't that what, and raise your hand if that isn't the case, and it isn't the case constantly. Bringing together a group of people is constantly more difficult than it seems like on the outside it should be. And when I kept looking at different kinds of teams, and I think that's what I was fortunate enough to be able to see different kinds of teams, development teams and installation teams and database data teams and customer service teams and service system administration, all those different, it kept on coming back over and over and over is how do you get that team in alignment to care about the same thing? And how do you communicate well enough to everyone in that team, all these different individuals with different backgrounds, experiences? How do you communicate well enough so that they are all in this same task together? And it feels sort of basic. There's nothing complicated about that. But what I kept seeing is it's all about how do you create a shared purpose, shared alignment, and how do you make sure people continue to understand and are able to take part in that, and using all of the different ways that are necessary so that every single individual, different background, personality, experience level can understand and take part in a similar way. So it came down to communication. Obviously that's why we're on the show and we're talking about this, but the central common key attribute was teams that were able to communicate well together. And by communicate well, I mean have difficult conversations, hard conversations, challenging conversations, as well as fun conversations, conversations that bring love into the team. All of those, the teams that are able to do all those different things, those are your high-performing teams. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day what they're trying to accomplish. That ability to be a team that does this kind of work together in this way enabled that team to go on and do all sorts of different activities.
So we talked before the show, not to break down the fourth wall, but one of the things you had told me, there are 3 types of communication, which is interesting. When you think of communication, you kind of just think of this big nebulous thing where it's very difficult to describe, define, put a little science around it. But maybe kind of break down those 3 types of communication for us.
That's true. And these are this is how I break it down in my head. Because you're right, communication, a lot of times you hear, someone's like, oh, I got to improve my communication skills, or you need to improve your communication, or you would be more successful if you, what the heck does that mean? Like communicate, there's so much. And I mean, are you talking about how I my physical presence, what I say, the words I say, how I say them? How do I craft them to different, like, what is communication? And so I like to get simple before I get complicated. And I learned that that's so difficult to do and so worthwhile because of the difficulty of trying to get really simple before you then dive into the complicated pieces. All communication, when I look at a challenge or I look at something I'm trying to do, I break it down into these 3 different types of communication that encompasses things that I think I mostly care about. And this is very workspace and professional, because the workspace, the professional context brings a lot of boundaries and walls. Everyone's joined a company, so you're already in there. I don't think of interpersonal relationships the same. I don't think of a marriage conversation the same, or a child-parent. I mean, those are different. That has so much more going on. But the workplace, as you know, there's 3. I look at inclusion conversations, presentation conversations, and conflict conversations. So the 3 types that I break those down because I can then understand them a little bit better and use inclusion conversation. Those are the belonging conversations. These are peers are with me. These are conversations that show I'm a part of something. I'm able to contribute and generally share. At Detroit Labs, that would be our Slack rooms, like our Detroit Labs general conversation Slack rooms. And then all of our different non-work related, the TV room, the video games room, all these different, where people self-organize into places just to talk about things. Presentation are all those kinds of conversations and communication where you're trying to explain, describe, sell something, pitch something. You want to convey a message to someone else, and there isn't resistance or stress against hearing that message. Mm-hmm. And then conflict, you always think about arguments. Conflict is just the kind of communication in my head where there might be different opinions. And so you're trying to convey a communication or a topic or something, and there might be other opinions that oppose that. And so that could be a debate. That could be an argument. That's also decision making, disagreements, organizational change, rollout. So anytime there's more than one side. And by sort of separating out and trying to get a little bit more simple in terms of what kinds of communication exist and what kinds I face, then I can look at each of those individually and decide different ways to either practice them, attack them, train them, whatever is appropriate.
Yeah, I really like the way you broke down these 3 types of communication. And I found it very interesting that you kind of started with inclusion, which is the one that has the belonging. And when we're in a professional setting, I feel like it's easy to explain like the value of presentation communications. You want to do sales, you want to share information, you want to pitch, you want to do refinement, you want to move forward. Conflict too, like we have to resolve, make a decision, we have to resolve disagreement. But when we talk about inclusion, can you, in your mind's eye, like how would you explain the value of inclusion to maybe like an executive? Where you're trying to say like, I want to give you this training about communication. Say like, it's important for your team members to feel like they belong. Besides like the feelings of how does that translate to like a successful business?
That's so good. That's so good. If I was having a pitch, or I was trying to sell an executive on like my services as a communication consultant, which don't exist, so don't at me about this. I would start with inclusion. And I would start with inclusion because, and the conversation with the executive would be, look, you are, and depending on this, let's just say it's a stereotype executive so that we can, you're paying a lot of money in salary to a lot of different people, 15, 20, however many people on the team or in the company or whatever it is. So starting with that, you have all these different people. If you lack inclusion, or if you don't care about this inclusion aspect or this belonging aspect around the conversation, you are getting hardly any value from wide areas of those people. Why? Because they don't want to participate. They don't want to contribute. They don't want to raise their hand. They don't want to be part of. They will do what you want them to do by you telling them necessarily, but you don't really get anything else out of it because they don't belong and you're not doing the work to help them belong. So that might be one aspect or angle. When I look at it, and that's one of our, and Dan remembers, that was one of our founding tenets at Labs, is that we're going to be building a company and hiring folks, and especially first couple of years, every single person we hired, we're like, oh my gosh, it's a lot, right? Because we're a small company, it's a lot of money. Every single person that we want to bring in, yes, we have a job and we want them to do this job, but we also want to capture and have them be part of all the other decision-making that might come along, because they might be either experts at something that we didn't know about, but more realistically, we knew we were trying to hire smart people, and we want smart people working on our problems. We don't necessarily care if you've worked on this problem before. We just know that, okay, you're smart, you have this ability, this experience and thought process. We want you to participate in that. So what do we have to work on for that? The inclusion aspect. Do I belong in these conversations? Do I belong at the table when we're talking about things? And that's how we did some of our very first early decisions, like our profit sharing and how we distribute training dollars and things like. It was because we created an inclusion, a place where the inclusion conversation, the belonging conversation could happen. And we were able to get lots of different ideas and then make decisions with a lot more smarts in the room than if it was just me, Dan, Paul, trying to figure something out.
Well, you make a really good point. In those early years, our hiring process, our GTKY hiring process, was very much born out of a group. There was only 8 of us, I think, maybe 7 of us. I know Dave was there when the GTKY process started to shape its form, come to form. But apart from the inclusive side of things, where does feedback fit in that? In those 3 different types. That's always one that always it comes up constantly, right? Giving feedback to people is important. It's also difficult. Where does that sit?
And we talk about it so much at Labs, like over and over and over. It's just constant part of the fabric of our. So feedback is an interesting one, because feedback, most people, maybe all people, and I'm just saying most people, find it very, very scary. And I think what people do is set feedback up as a conflict. Because, hey, if I'm going to give you feedback, Dan, I'm going to tell you something and you're going to argue against it. And where's my fear come from? Well, I don't want to have to win that argument. I don't want to try and figure out how to win that argument. I just want to, and then you come around and you say, well, I'm not going to give Dan feedback. Why? Because I don't want to argue, or I'm not good at it, or I'm afraid of that argument. So feedback structured well and thought through well is a presentation. Because feedback, and good feedback, is you preparing and presenting information for someone else to consume, and then for that other person to decide what they want to do with that information. It's a pitch. It is your presentation of an idea. And if we can shift our idea of feedback more towards that presentation mindset versus the conflict mindset, I think we develop and we give better feedback and we give better information, because we can detach from this fear of argument and debate. Because really my responsibility as a feedback provider, assuming I'm not your manager, you don't report to me, my responsibility as a feedback is to make sure I give you information that you can do something with. And that do something might be to throw it right in the trash. Okay, but that's the responsibility mix, right? My responsibility, present well to you. Your responsibility, decide what to do with it. Everything from change your entire life to throw it in the trash. Probably something in the middle.
I like that, because it makes it a little bit less scary. Yeah, I mean, I think feedback, there's a human element, right? So it's naturally going to be a little bit scary, but I do like removing that, and that it does make me want to jump to what is likely the scarier piece of communication, which is conflict. And restate the way you said conflict, because I thought that was very interesting, because what sounds like a very tense thing, you made conflict sound very more matter of fact.
I look at conflict as any communication situation where there is more than one opinion. There's more than one side. That's conflict. That opinion might be loosely held. Where do you want to go to lunch? You want to go? Let's pretend it's a year and a half ago and we're actually talking about where we're going to go to lunch together. And we're going to sit at a table together. Like Tobi, I'm going to be right across at a table. Oh my gosh.
Tobi's food needs to be hot, though. He does not eat cold food.
I want to go to the sub shop that serves cold food only. Tobi wants to. Conflict, that's conflict.
A real conflict.
It might be a real conflict, or it could be a really, I deserve a 12% raise. I'm going to get a 6% raise. It could be super super important, high stakes conflict. Promotion, not promotion, fired, not fired. Are you going to have Diet Pepsi, real Pepsi? Like, these are all conflict if there's different sides and opinions. And so obviously there is scary conflict, and I would never diminish that. But I also cover anything and sort of encompass anything with those different opinions as conflict, because there's some overlap, and it allows my little brain to sort of get a little bit more handle around what I might want to do or how I might want to handle that.
So let me ask you this, and it might be a little loaded, and maybe even overly simplistic here, but why is managing conflict a core piece to having a great functioning team, great functioning company?
Because if you don't have, you can't have a high performing team if everyone has the exact same opinion about everything. That's not a high performing team, because that means that team comes from exactly one place and one mindset, one attitude. That means that team is learning and adapting to new things exactly at the same time together. That means it's impossible. Like, right off the bat, it's impossible. But even if it was possible, think about how terrible that is. That's a Brave New World. That's Aldous Huxley, A Brave New World, sci-fi horror, not actual existence. And so a high-performing team has to have tons and tons of conflict. They have to have tons and tons of opinion, but they also have they have to have tons of ways to easily manage through, get through that conflict to decisions, to action, to something on the other side, without leaving a pile of bodies and hurt feelings behind every time you make one of these decisions.
I get that's like
hand in hand.
Yeah, that's like a great transition to kind of even talk about, because immediately as you're talking, I was thinking like these conflicts are going to exist, and they're going to be lots of them if you have high functioning teams. So like transitioning into like a practical way of coming to alignment and resolving this conflict that it looks like, from the way you describe conflict, it will happen like multiple times a day. So like, I think Dan, we talked about this pre-show about like how you're going to walk us through like some crucial conversations. Like, what is that? What is like a crucial conversation? Can you just want to share about that real quick?
And so one of the things that's sort of a nice aspect of thinking about communication in this way is communication's a skill. No one's born being a great communicator. And no one just manages to happen into being a great communicator. It's a skill. And like every skill, if you choose to and you want to, you can develop expertise in it. You can train in it. You can get better in it. You can get better in inclusionary communication skills. You can get better in presentation communication skills. You can get better in conflict communication skills. And one of the things that we chose to do at Labs, and I brought into Labs, was to focus on a specific kind of conflict, which is the most scary, basically, to Dan's, coming back to Dan's word, the stuff that really gets you worried, nervous, and makes you run away. Like, I'm just not going to do it. And that is what Crucial Conversations aims to address. So a crucial conversation based on the definition of the methodology is one that has opposing emotions, opposing opinions. So it fits in my conflict definition right away. There's strong emotion on the two sides or the multiple sides, and there's high stakes. There has to be high stakes, emotion, and sides. Our lunch conversation isn't a crucial conversation because we don't have all three of those things. We have opposing opinions. There's not high stakes. If we fail to make a decision, we don't have lunch for one day. I don't know about you, Toby, but for me, I could not have lunch for 100 days and be totally fine. So the stakes aren't there. They're probably not them. So a crucial conversation, a special kind of conversation that has those three elements. And those are the ones that make you sweat. Those are the ones that you're most afraid of approaching. And what the methodology allows for and the framework allows for is training and practice, which is something we don't get a lot of. We don't get a chance to train and practice in something that's high stakes, different opinion, without the result being a catastrophe. If you're practicing in real life and that means you don't get a job or you don't get a promotion or you get fired or you alienate a team, like those stakes are way too high for you to practice that, right? Mm-hmm. So Crucial Conversations gives you a place where you can actually practice these things without impacting your life in a terrible negative way. And it also gives you individual skills to practice. And so we brought that to Labs specifically to focus on that kind of conflict that would show up in a project team, service in interpersonal, whatever it is in the workplace.
I should mention crucial conversations. While it's a great description in general of a conversation of importance,
yes,
it is a thing.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
It's a branded thing. They're not sponsors, Nathan, so we don't necessarily have to call them out.
Okay.
But so I think it's great.
We sponsor them a lot because we've bought a lot of stuff through them. So I mean, there's a sponsorship relationship. It's just the other way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, they're winning very heavily with us right now. But I like it. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about Vital Smarts is who runs the Crucial Conversation. You have become a certified trainer over the last, I think, 2, maybe even 3 years now. Have been working with team members at Detroit Labs through Crucial Conversations, and I think it's great because oftentimes you hear the whole be better at communicating, but then no one actually does anything about it. So I just wanted to make sure we pointed out that it's a thing and it's a strategy that you've brought to Detroit Labs to try to get rid of that, just be better at communicating.
So we're targeting and trying to provide a mechanism for folks to specifically train on and get better at this skill of managing and navigating through these crucial conversations. And Vital Smarts is the training provider. There's the book that's out there. It's been out there for years, over 10 years. It's very research-based. I personally got into it and really liked it because it overlaps with a lot of biology. And I sort of find that fascinating, like the biology of us that starts a lot of our reactions or our actions, the hormones, the chemical reactions, the things like that. And a lot of the crucial conversation starts by talking through and about that. We're talking a lot about that all over the place with unconscious bias mitigation, with stress reduction, and all those kinds of things. So it's been out there for a long time. In terms of the book, it's sold millions. The training itself has probably been out there, I think, at least 10 years, maybe longer. I think it showed up after the book. And it provides a mechanism and a path to walk through to start and to continue to restart these conversations. And that's sort of an interesting aspect of it. It doesn't talk about ever solving anything, ever getting to the end of anything. What it really is concerned about is, how do I start having these conversations, and how do I position myself and help the other person I'm having the conversation with? How do I position myself to possibly be more likely to get to a positive resolution, positive outcome?
You mentioned a great point. Oh, sorry, Nathan, you were skipping the internet. You mentioned a great point just now that, I've taken the class and you led it, you facilitated. And I think it really changed my mindset from approaching when it comes to crucial conversation, because this class is not training you to win arguments. It's not training you to be great at just winning your crucial conversation or convincing people. I think it really changed my mindset that it's just preparing you to better approach it, to give the conversation a better chance of success, and that you don't really. Sometimes you don't even control the outcome. It could still not go well. But it kind of prepares you percentage-wise to make it the best case scenario in your approach. So I really like, not that they need more recommendation, but as someone that has taken it, I think that was one great takeaway that I took from it.
Yeah, and it ties back into this. Communication is so complicated, and there's so much of it. So if you want to talk about and learn and train about how to win, you want to take negotiation class. You want to find your way over to the Harvard Center for Negotiation or something like that, and take those and train that kind of thing. And that's the place where you learn about how to balance and understand the value and maximizing the value that you're giving up in terms of getting and all that. Crucial Conversations doesn't care about that. If you want to work on your conflict skills around debate, you want to go take a debate class, and it's totally different. So all these things are very different. We specifically wanted to talk about these high stakes, high emotion different opinion conversations, because we come up with those so much in our workplace, with our clients, with ourselves, internally, whatever. So that's why we chose this instead of, say, a negotiation class. It's a very important point.
So I want to kind of, if we can open the Crucial Conversations book and strategy here a little bit, and maybe give our viewers a little flavor of some of the teaching and methodology is. So, if we pretend for a moment that, Tobi has a very heated conflict with me, for anybody that knows Tobi, a heated conflict is a bit of a stretch.
I'm trying to get there. Trying to get there. You know what? I'm very creative, so I'm there. I'm already done.
So how Tobi's very frustrated with me, very upset, different viewpoints. What type of guidance, what type of strategies would you give Tobi to not resolve it, but approach it?
Mm-hmm. And so Crucial Conversations as a framework and a methodology focuses very, very heavily on you first. And this is sort of the thing that's a little bit different. I have to have this conversation, or I have this feeling with someone else. I've got to do a ton of work with myself first. And the reason for that is, there's multiple reasons, but the first one is it's very smart. Tobi can't really control what Dan is going to do in the situation. Tobi can control what Tobi can do. And so why wouldn't we focus most of our effort, attention, and energy on the thing that actually gets results, which is I can decide what I'm going to do. So Crucial Conversations, Tobi, he sits down, he's going to use these skills straight out the book. The first, and there's a lot around it, so I'm just going to pick out a couple of my favorite bits. And this is not it. This is not the whole methodology, but a couple. The first thing Tobi sits down and figures out is why do you care? And what do you really want out of this? Like, what's the whole point of this? You might have hurt feelings. You might really be pissed. You might really be upset about, but is there something you actually want? Is there something that you actually need? And the answer is probably yes, but the first step of that is get down there and figure out, okay, what is it I really want here? What is my outcome? And then the first few things is probably wrong. So keep going. It's just like brainstorming. The first few things you brainstorm, they're the obvious ones and they're not the real ones. You got to keep going a little bit. And so once Tobi is sat down, he's like, what do I really want? Maybe I want Dan's respect. Maybe I want more authority over this decision. Maybe I want a different kind of relationship at the meeting table, like whatever. And once Tobi figures that out and he sat down and does it, the next thing you do, Tobi, is you are going to start imagining and trying to come up in your head, what does it look like if in this conversation that you have with Dan, if that is really what you wanted? So when you say, okay, I want more respect at the table with Dan, you have to pretend and imagine in your head, okay, so what is it going to look like if that's really what you want from Dan when you have this conversation? And one of the reasons you're doing this, and this is something you do in the conversation as well, but one of the reasons you're doing this is you have to start creating ways to shortcut all of the natural stress and fear and anger reactions that will come up in any of these conversations. We're specifically picking a crucial conversation, so that part of that means that you're going to have these stress reactions. And what you need are ways to interrupt that and remember and remind yourself, okay, what is it I really want to have happen here? Okay, and what would it look like if that's really what I wanted? Would I be saying these things or something else? Would I be doing these things or would I be doing something else? Okay, yeah. And so you sort of set up with that. That's some of your prep. The next part of your prep is all about Crucial Conversations. When you have the conversation, has its little acronym, of course, and there's 3 steps that you basically follow to start this conversation. First step with Dan is you state your facts. The second step is you tell your story, and the third step is you ask for and try and get Dan's take on that whole point. And then there's more, of course, but that's sort of the foundational first step. And these are super, super important and difficult things. Again, you get down to simplicity, and simplicity is where all the difficulty sits. So the first step, okay, what are the facts? Facts are, as we learned about in science school, things, high school or elementary or whatever. Those are things that you can measure, independently observe, you can record. Others could do the same activity that you just did and get the exact same result. Those are who, what, where, when, how, literal facts. This is so difficult because a lot of times when we're angry, hurt, upset, scared, those are our emotions unattached to the facts until you sit down and figure them out. So Tobi then sits down and says, okay, well, so what are the facts of this? Well, Dan was a big jerkhead. That's that a fact. Okay, so what did Dan do? Well, Dan was mean to me. Well, that's not a fact. Well, Dan was aggressive. Well, that's not a fact. Dan was loud. That's not a fact. Again, can you require a third party? Would they necessarily? You get down to what are the facts? Dan said maybe this specific thing. Dan did this specific thing. Dan showed this thing on the screen, and it was work that you had done. And Dan didn't mention you when he showed that. You have to get down to those facts. Once you have those facts, then you figure out what your stories are around those facts. Human beings don't communicate with facts. We don't walk around and say, oh, it's 73.2 degrees outside. That is 1.5 degrees warmer than it was yesterday. I think spring must be coming. No, we say, oh, it's warmer today than yesterday. That's a story. And the story is how we synthesize facts and make it possible for us to communicate and share. And so what Tobi's putting together is, here's these facts, Dan. And these facts led Tobi to believe this, to put together this story. Dan, I sent you this presentation. You showed this presentation. You did not mention my name when you showed the presentation. That might be 3 facts. Boring. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Yes, that's true, but so what? And then the story. Dan, when you did that, I felt like you didn't respect me, and I felt like my work was being taken advantage of for you. That stuff is the story that I put together. How do you see it, Dan? Or Dan, like, what's your side of that? And so what Tobi's done in this framework, and why I love this so much, is he's presented the facts, which are the damning bits of evidence, but they're so boring and non-controversial, and everyone, yeah. And then he's told you how that has impacted him and how he synthesized that story. Now, this is how this came out to me. And then he allows you to share what your story was around that. And your story might be, oh, well, I had thought that, or I had done this, or I had believed that, or I assumed this, or whatever it is. And what you've done is you've opened up the opportunity to actually have that exchange without immediately getting into the argument phase, or the stress phase, the anger phase, the fear phase. So Crucial Conversations describes that methodology, but really describes the other 90% of the content around that, so that you can get into a conversation like that and stay in that conversation. Like how you can create a safe conversation space, how you can keep referring to and getting back to those facts, how you can clarify, how you can make sure, and how you can remember. At the end of the day, Tobi wants this thing to happen, and this is what's in his head, is how would he act if that's what he wanted, and being true and aligned with that. That is 3-4 bullet points of the Crucial Conversations methodology.
That's amazing. It's much better than the approach I was going to take with Dan, which is just like walk up there and it's like, first of all, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
But
Exactly.
that is a whole, like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to watch this episode again, because that was just, you put it so well.
It's so opposite of what we would normally naturally do, because we're storytellers. That's how we interact with other humans. So the storytelling aspect of that says, Dan, you've got to show me some more damn respect. These meetings, you treat me like garbage. And what you've done there is you've led with the story. And listen how different it is when I say that versus, Dan, I gave you this presentation, you showed it, and you didn't show my name. That makes me feel like you're treating me like garbage. And that makes me feel like, or that to me, that means you don't respect me. And the difference, and I mean, Dan, what's the difference between those two approaches? Like, where do you feel like you can go with either of those?
Well, I feel like I have something to react to. That's not emotion going to the next level, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Tobi comes in and says, how dare you? He couldn't even finish that with a straight face. But if he comes in and says, how dare you? I might immediately tense up and get ready for a fight and fight back.
Absolutely.
When he comes in and he says, you didn't put my name on this, and that made me feel undervalued, immediately I can go, oh my goodness, I have something that I can react to. I can apologize for, if that's ultimately what I choose to do in that situation as the receiver of that communication. But I also I now have behavior that I know how to change for the future, rather than just make Tobi feel better in the future. Make Tobi not come after me and say, how dare you? So I think that's getting to the core of the facts there.
Yeah. And there's so much. I think another reason I love this methodology so much is that notion of facts and stories is so powerful all over the place. And it doesn't have to be about communication. It's everything. It's one of my daughters comes up and says, "Hey, blah, blah, blah. It's a story." I immediately, if I want to interact with it in a certain way, I could say, "Oh, well, where's that come from? How did that start? And not in a conflict. This could just be a curiosity kind of thing, but it's changed the way I approach and view things. I mean, I'm not even going to talk about politics, but if you think about facts versus stories within our political system, I mean, what facts? It's all stories. Everything is a story. And it's an interesting, when you start thinking about, okay, so these facts lead to stories, and the same fact, Dan, you didn't put my name on this presentation and then you presented it. Those two facts, that is an infinite number of stories. It's right. Tobi's story, it's your story, it's everyone else in that room's story. Any fact can come up with so many different stories. And that's why it's so important for us to learn, train, and become comfortable with separating and then sharing what our story is about this fact. Because we realize every fact, it's a different story to everyone else. And sometimes and a lot of times it's the difference in those stories that causes all this conflict, these hurt feelings, this anger, this rage, this hatred. And it's because this same fact creates these different stories, and we don't know how to deal with and manage or start with the facts. We go into the stories, treat them as facts, and then go off and have wars.
So let me insert this here because I think it's a great time for it. We had an Instagram story in prep for this show, and we had a question come in on the Instagram story that I think is, it's a great time to bring up because it ties in nicely here. JM_J, I believe I'm saying that correctly, asked, what happens when someone attacks your character or something not work related?
So I thought the question part would be like, what's your favorite color? What kind of car do you drive? What have you been cooking during quarantine?
I mean, you cook a lot, but
I've been cooking a lot. Yeah. That is, so first of all, that is so big and so wide and so interesting, so juicy. But there's also like that character assassination, like that runs such a gamut. Online focused attacks on versus, someone's just saying or mischaracterized, like there's so much in there. So I think trying to keep it at work and maybe just pretending, okay, what we're talking about here is someone at work that undersells you and maybe misstates or missells or talks about the things that you do in a way that are disingenuous, that are intentionally poor, wrong. The first thing I would do is looking at that. I would try and figure out, what do I want to do? It's sort of the same. It's not a crucial conversation yet, but the same sort of process that Tobi might have gone through. How do I care about this, and what do I want to care about this? Is this an inclusion kind of conversation? Is this a presentation? Is this a conflict? Do I want to address this directly with the person? Do I want to stand just on my own actions? So I would get straight on what exactly I want or how exactly I want to address it. Do I even need to address this? And then I would go back to facts and stories. What are the facts around? Are there any facts around this? And based on the question, there has to be some more interaction like this. I would look at that. Okay, so what are the facts around? Here's a tricky part. You may be the asshole in a situation like this. And so one of the things that you have to look at is, okay, what are the facts around this? You have to sort of assure yourself that, this is not, this isn't something that should happen. And so look and say, what are the facts and understand. If you can't get any of those facts, you have no idea what those facts, that might be, and I'm not giving any advice in this situation, but that might be where I might look and say, you know what, I want to approach this by trying to get at some facts. That might be the conversation I would try to have with the person. I might look at that and I might look at it and say, you know what, I want to address this by re-clarifying what has already been stated and done. Like if I'm in a leadership position and I'm trying to roll something out and there are people bad talking this thing that is being rolled out. Very, very common, happens all the time. Every single rollout has this, any size company. Maybe I don't want to go directly to the person and say, maybe I want to just address this overall. Maybe. So there's all sorts of different ways. Like there's no answer, but I would fall back to what is my intent and need and desire here for this situation? What actually are the facts behind what's going on here? Could I understand and get to the story this person's telling? Right? And then do I have a different story? Compare those. What's the gap between those? What's the how? And then depending on what you need to do, how you need to do it, at least you have a starting basis of information that you could decide what your next strategy or plan of attack is. And it comes into everything. Is this a person in a position of power over you? Is this someone that does not have that? Is this someone that you interact with daily? Is this rarely? Like, there's so much, right? And I would need to use a lot of that.
That's awesome. I'll point out we're getting a lot of great comments in here about feels like kind of like a shared therapy session, which is fantastic. I think a lot of people are walking away with some really great techniques. I'll remind folks that if you do have questions for Nathan, as you can see, he's more than willing to answer them. Tobi, I don't know if you were gonna jump in there for a second.
Yeah, I was curious too. Like you just mentioned about even in this question, the answers like just kind of default into fact and stories. So for when you think about the like separating the fact and the story, that's a lot of and the emotions. That's a lot of where the meat is. Someone watching today, they're like, haven't taken crucial conversation, haven't done that. I just want to walk away from this video knowing better how to, what would be terrible is like me thinking that I watched the video and I broke it to fact and a story where the fact is actually a story, right? So like, how do I train that muscle of recognizing this is a fact, this is a story? There's a lot of like, of course, like self-awareness there, and I'm just curious how to train that muscle. Is this something I feel?
Oh my gosh, that is such an outstanding question because it ties into we don't want to know the facts. We want our stories to be true. So we always want our stories to be true, and most of us want to be the heroes of our stories. And what that leads us to are, well, here's the fact, and it proves my story. And you're exactly right. Well, that fact isn't a fact. Dan, you're very aggressive. That's a story. Dan, you're very loud. Tobi, you're very quiet. Story. These things that we've gotten used to. Tobi, you're very creative. Dan, you're very fit. They're stories. I'm sorry. We don't like, and we're not naturally tied back to those facts. It takes practice. Let's say 1, it takes practice, and 2, it takes some kind of peer group for you to practice with. And whether that's we do crucial conversation, we actually practice, but whether that's someone that I'm going to check in and you can say, hey, Tobi, this happened. I'm feeling like this. And Tobi, if you also have this background in it, you might be able to come back with that and say, okay, so why do you feel like this? What is this? And I'm like, well, this happened. Well, that's okay, but what's the fact? What's the fact behind that? Well, that is the fact. Well, no. So there might be individual, but a lot of it, if it's just independent, you have to train through practice, through observation, and through going back to what we learned in our fundamental scientific method class. Okay, I think this is the fact. Can I measure this? Is it independently observable? What's the number around it? What? If I can't answer any of those things, it's okay. That's still a story. What's back, and continue to do that. So the other aspect of this, then the question, you really have to want to do that in the first place. And again, we want our stories to be right, and we want to be the heroes of them. If you really don't want to interrogate this, if you really just want your stories to be right, you can't really use this to hide behind that. So you also have to start with an intent that, okay, this is going to make my communication better, or the way I look at the world better. So I very real and truly want to go through this kind of exercise and try to understand this. Crucial conversation is a terrible mechanism and method to win an argument or to get your way. Because what it trains and what it tells you to practice over and over and over is going back to these facts and getting to the stories, and then sharing that and hearing what the other person has on that same, and coming to some sort of ground that might be closer, but it's not your way. That's not what it's about. So the intent that you have behind it is just as important, maybe the most important part of it. You're not going to learn this methodology to win arguments with an uncle in your family. I'm sorry.
That's a great way of putting it.
This is a methodology that you might be able to have and get through an entire conversation with your uncle and get to a better understanding of where he comes from versus where you come from. If you don't want that, you can't use Crucial Conversation to get there.
Wow.
So let me ask this. So you've taken something that is largely an art, put a little science behind it, given some techniques, and certainly conflict is the first one you focused heavily on inside of Detroit Labs. Obviously the other ones are present and are always worked on. But let me ask you this, especially as it relates to Crucial Conversations. Have you had any pushback on implementing something like this? Any naysayers, anything like that?
A lot of pushback on it, and a lot of it is perfectly valid. This is it's a model and a methodology that sort of hand waves around a lot of power dynamics. So power dynamics in the workplace, power dynamics in society. It assumes that me and you, we can sit down and have a conversation in the first place. It assumes that you will listen. It assumes that I will, so there's a lot of those assumptions. And even though the book says, this is a methodology to use when these things are true, it's still, okay, if someone says or is doing these kinds of things and I can't even sit down with that person to have a conversation, or it doesn't work. So there's that. There are some problems that different team members that have gone through have with some of the content, some of the examples, some of the videos. So there's pushback on that. And then there's just the whole notion of I don't know any people that I can have this kind of conversation with and get any results. Like that uncle, are you kidding? He's been that way for 25 years. I can't have these conversations. That might be true. And that's valid pushback. So this is one way to train. I still think you have huge value personally if you want to study, train in this art of, okay, what's the facts behind the stories? What other stories might be possible with those same facts? And once you start, if this is the first time you're introduced to something like that, you'll see it everywhere. It's the basis of so many different kinds, productivity and meditation, and those are fundamentals that show up all over the place. But that's true. I don't argue that if you just did it better, it would. No, the pushback is valid. This works in certain conditions. No matter what, if you go into it with full personal intention, I believe that it will improve your ability to communicate and your ability to separate. It does not guarantee any improvement in your ability to make your point heard or feel better with a relationship, because that's you. That's 50% you and 50% the other person.
Now, Nathan, we do have, we're going to get to our last question here in a minute, but I do want to bring up one question that came up earlier in the conversation that I thought was, worthwhile to bring back around. It was on feedback and well, not, we established certainly not conflict, but do you see value in providing general positive feedback? Just great job, nice work. So not very specific, but just general.
Hey, Dan, you're doing a great job with these live feeds.
Thank you. That's all I need.
We're done now. Bye.
So is there value in getting a like on a Facebook post, a heart on a tweet? Is there value in that? And I look at the transient value, the brief value, that feels good and then it's gone value. Versus, okay, if I want to make a lasting impact, that feedback doesn't have any value. Again, if I get back to the ways I think about communication, the 3 ways, those are inclusion conversations. Hey, great job on that live feed. The value to you might be, someone knows that actually exists. If you're thinking critically about what I just said, you're probably not believing it. You're not disbelieving it. You're just not giving it any weight. Okay, what does that even mean? There's an inclusion. I do that. That's sort of neat. And you might drive. There is harm with that kind of feedback when you go around springing that kind of feedback and believing you are making more than an instant on and off impact with someone. So if you report to me, Dan, and your major initiative over the year was this live stream, and your team is Toby, and it's Dave, and it's Jacqueline, and it's Diana, and whoever else might be involved, and and boom, boom, boom. And then at the end of the year, my feedback to you is, oh, that was really great. It was a really great job. Yeah, I really liked that. And then we're going, and if I believe I've given you feedback, that's the harm. And the harm is to you because I have this expectation. It's completely false. I haven't done anything for you as the person in charge. And since that is where it falls, a lot of times, like, oh, I think I'm giving really great feedback because it's so general, it's so vague, but it feels like I've done it. I've done this hard job. That might be why it's dangerous. It's because it's so often mistaken for valid, actionable, lengthy, long-term, something that you can actually do something with feedback. Long ass answer. I don't know if that was
no. I think that was good because I think sometimes just the general feedback, it probably feels better for the person giving it because it's easy. And it's I think you wrap it up really well. It's fleeting. It's that heart on Instagram. Totally never hearts.
And if I just drop in and give you something like that without any other context, are you kidding? You know all the things that you don't like and you do like and you've seen and you're working on, and that's what I get. It's not good. So it's not good feedback at all.
So if you had to briefly give one piece of advice, we've heard a number of different things today that we probably could walk back and everyone can work on. But if you had to give one piece of advice for someone looking to either improve their own communication or improve their team/company's communication, what would that one piece of advice be?
Let's think about someone who wants to improve their team's communication. Right. It's a new year. I've got new energy. I want my team's communication improve over the course of this year. My one piece of advice for that person, that person in authority power, is first, get very, very clear and simple. So the hard work of getting simple. What do you even mean with that? Again, like what is it that you want to happen? What is the improvement in the communication, and be able to communicate that so that you could tell a stranger and they would have some sense of what you're talking about. So get clear on what you want, and then train yourself on getting better at that, and then model it. That would be my advice. Is if you want to improve communication in a group that you interact with, understand what that looks like, train it yourself, and model it with your team members, with your folks. Yeah, that might mean you have to hold off on your initiative to 2022 because it takes you 2021 to actually model this to a point where, but for communication, I think you really want, especially if you have a position of authority, you really want to be able to be in a spot where you can show that you're also trying and you're also working on it, and you also have, and that also helps you understand how impossible it is to get it right. And every time it's a mistake, and how you handle a mistake, and what you do with it, and how you work with grace and integrity around that. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. All right. Well, Nathan, we're not going to keep you any longer. You have broken the record for length of stream, which is fantastic.
We're starting season 3 off right.
Exactly. I think this was great content. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna move you backstage and wrap up, but we very, very much appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. Bye.
Oh, hello, Toby. It's just you and I now. I thought that was fantastic.
I know that was fantastic. He is so good at breaking down something that is so complex and making it so easy that it sticks. I'm pretty sure a lot of people watch now, you just remember facts, stories, and you would just go away with that. And he's just so good at that. And I'm glad we're able to have him on. And I just was remembering going through the training as well. As Nathan said, it kind of spills to other aspects of your life. It doesn't really just stop at work. Then when you look at the news, if we don't want to say that, when you look at the news, you're like, what are the facts here? What are the stories? And yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah, I think now you can see why I said Nathan in a lot of ways has mentored my peopling skills and largely watching, from both the feedback he's provided over the years, but also just watching how he works with other folks, how he manages, how he grows others, and how he communicates. All right, so I think we got to do a few house cleaning things here, Toby. I believe. So if you are watching this later, or if you had to kind of duck out for a meeting, and you have questions for Nathan, please feel free to put them in the comments afterwards. We'll continue to monitor those comments. Diana will stay on top of it. And we'll find a way to get you those answers, probably through said comments, because I think we can reply to things now, in at least on LinkedIn. So we'll make sure to do that. Also, just make sure you head over to our social channels, YouTube. You can subscribe there. Head over to, if you're on LinkedIn, follow us there. We put out a ton of very relevant content. And then, of course, our monthly Labs Live stream. I believe it's been kind of monthly so far lately. Maybe we can even get a bracket in from time to time. Right. Maybe Toby's favorite hot sandwich, and we'll disqualify all cold things and make sure pickles aren't included. But yeah, follow all our other social channels. Hey, Dave, I'm looking for a thumbs up. Am I good? Did I cover all the house cleaning stuff? All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Dave, you want to go ahead and play us out?